Are you avoiding silence and stillness? Most of us avoid silence and stillness. What's that saying? That was an awkward silence. It just shows, with a saying like that, how uncomfortable we are with silence or stillness. What do people say when they experience that moment of stillness in between one event and another event? They say things like they're bored. So what do we do to avoid this silence and stillness in our life? We look to fill it. We look to fill those moments of silence with noise. I shouldn't say noise, sound. Oh, that was an awkward silence. Let me just say something just to fill this void of sound. Okay, the movie came to an end, and I'm not quite sure what's the next thing that I'm going to do. And right when the movie comes to an end, roll the credits. You're not really watching the movie, but you can't just sit still on the couch. Nothing is really happening. There's this boredom that you experience. So then what do? Reach for the phone. Fill that stillness with some sort of activity. And once you become aware of this, how you're filling these moments of silence and stillness, you start seeing how you're doing exactly what I'm saying. You're actually avoiding the silence and the stillness. You're trying to fill it, cover it up. This is actually happening everywhere. It's one of the reasons why they play music at restaurants. Of course, it sets the ambiance, and it's nice to have some beautiful classical music in the background, or some Italian music in the background, an Italian restaurant, or whatever it is. But one of the reasons actually is to fill that silence in between the conversations. When one person stops talking, there might be this dead silence. And they didn't want that awkward silence in the restaurant. They didn't want the customers to feel that discomfort. They didn't want that tension to be experienced and be associated with the restaurant. So it's this filling of silence. You notice this in an elevator, the elevator music. It'd be very awkward to be in an elevator with no elevator music, dead silence, with strangers so close. Throw in some eye contact. Sounds like a prison that's going up and down. Right? You see this even with kids these days. I'm bored. So then here's an iPad. Oh, you're bored? Oh, there's something wrong with that boredom. Let me solve that boredom for you. Here's an iPad. So you see that we're filling the silence and the stillness all the time. But what that means, what I'm bringing awareness to, is that's actually an opportunity to connect with that silence and stillness, that's actually an opportunity to experience yourself. Why is it that you're running from that silence and stillness? Ultimately, you are the silence and stillness. That's your true self. And that's why it feels so unfamiliar, your true self. It feels like you don't know what you truly are because you've been avoiding yourself your entire life. That stillness is an opportunity to rest. That which is still is at rest. So when you experience that stillness, that's your opportunity to relax into that stillness. But what you might be experiencing is this feeling of agitation. And that's typically what we experience when we say that we're bored. We feel this kind of this tension, this agitation where I'm restless, I just gotta move. And that restlessness is actually arising in those moments of stillness where we're experiencing that stillness where nothing's covering it up. Because it's actually always here. That stillness is the basis of all activity. But when one activity comes to an end and the other activity hasn't quite started, there's this gap between activity 1 and activity 2. And now we are getting a glimpse of the stillness. There's a pocket of stillness. And it's more noticeable now that this one activity has come to an end and the other one hasn't started. There's this agitation. There's this tension. There's this feeling like I can't just sit still, I gotta move. And by simply noticing that and allowing yourself to relax, where you're relaxing that tension, where you notice that agitation and you're simply dissolving it by simply being aware of it. It's actually a non-doing, that you're just simply being still and you're just observing that tension. You're observing that agitation. You're observing that discomfort. You're observing that restlessness. And what you notice is actually you aren't in discomfort. You aren't agitated. You aren't restless. From where you're watching the restlessness, that watching is actually not restless at all. It is the stillness. It is at rest. And this is only realized when you relax into that stillness, when you simply are still, because you notice that there's something that's still watching something that's agitated. There's something that's at rest watching something that's restless. And just simply watching it actually starts dissolving that restlessness, melting that tension. And then when this is continued, instead of avoiding it, then you just find that you're more and more relaxed. And you can say you have a better relationship with this stillness and silence. There's greater trust. There's more relaxation. There's more ease. There's more peace. You're able to essentially listen to your heart better. There seems to be this intuition, this inner guidance. So it's simply that I'm bringing awareness to the fact that there's lots of opportunities in your day-to-day life for experiencing yourself. There's lots of opportunities to connect with that stillness and silence. And at first, it shows up as simply these gaps in the day where there's just this silent pause. You get in a car and you start driving, and you notice that there's the habit of turning on the radio or plugging in your phone and playing music. And you're just driving 5 minutes away. But can you drive in silence? Notice how you're always trying to fill that silence. Notice how you're always trying to fill the stillness. Notice the action, the habit of reaching for your phone and just wanting to get busy. And by bringing awareness to this, you start realizing how much you're actually filling that silence and stillness. You actually realize how plugged in you are to like your phone and the internet and talking to people. You might even notice how you actually talk to yourself when there is that stillness and silence, where if you just go for a walk or you're cutting the grass, you're kind of talking to yourself. You notice with people, they actually do it verbally out loud. Become aware of that chatter even more so. So it's just simply about bringing awareness to these opportunities to experience that stillness and silence. And you can inquire, what are you afraid of? You can inquire, there's something that doesn't want to experience that stillness and silence. There's something that doesn't want to come to an end. There's something that doesn't want to rest. There's something that doesn't want to relax. Inquire, what is that? This is experiential. It's something that you have to look into. What is it? Don't just listen to what I'm saying. It's like as if I'm giving you homework. Find out, report back. What is it that's in conflict with that stillness and silence? What is it that doesn't want to come to an end? What is it that wants to stay busy? What is it that wants to stay active? What is it that wants to continue consuming content? And find out. Which means that you'll have to experience that stillness and silence and pay attention to what's arising. And really notice. And this is a start, because usually you're avoiding it at all costs. So now you can start becoming curious. Oh, I don't know. Seems like you gave me something to investigate. Okay, let me find out so I can report back. And this is the first step. The first step is like you're testing the waters. There's the stillness and silence, and you're just testing it. And it might feel uncomfortable at first, but what you start noticing is that you actually warm up to this stillness and silence. You start getting comfortable, right? When people say that was an awkward pause, you actually find that you're totally relaxed, that you don't feel that awkwardness, that you actually enjoy those pauses. And if you're watching my videos, you're actually more used to that silence than most, because there's so much silence in a lot of these videos. I intentionally make them to be more meditative, be more silence. There's so much stillness. That's why a lot of people don't watch them, is because it's too awkward for them. There's so much just eye gazing, long pauses, sitting still. We're actually giving you more opportunity to connect with yourself. And that's what you're experiencing when you're experiencing the serenity, the tranquility, the peace that you're experiencing while watching these videos. It's because you're actually connecting with that stillness and silence. You're connecting with yourself. You're experiencing yourself. And at first, you start experiencing yourself unknowingly. It's like you can't put your finger on it. You don't know why you're feeling the peace. You don't know why you're feeling tranquil, serene, relaxed. And when this happens, you might always be attributing that peace, that serenity, that tranquility, that relaxation, that rest to an activity. I'm feeling it because I was stretching. I was feeling it because I was gardening. I was feeling it because I was knitting. But what I'm saying is test it out for yourself. Remove the activity. Sit still. Be silent. And see if you're experiencing that same peace. Then you start making friends with that stillness and silence. You're no longer just warming up to it. You're actually prioritizing it. You're giving yourself, you're creating. At first, you're just noticing the gaps. Oh, shoot, I'm filling the gaps of stillness and silence. I don't like this awkward pause. I don't like the awkward silence. It's so weird to be in a car with someone and not have the radio on. It's so weird for me to sit on the toilet and not be on my phone. It's so weird for me to go for a walk without my AirPods. You start noticing how you're actually avoiding the stillness and silence throughout the day. Then you start noticing that, okay, well, that means that there's also opportunities to experience that. Let me just warm up to that idea. Then you start growing, warming up more and more. The silence and stillness starts growing on you. Then you actually start noticing that it's this pull to the stillness and silence. It's like you want to return back to it. You can't help it. At this point, everything else felt like you were making the effort. At this point, it's completely effortless, and you're pulled into stillness and silence. And when this pull is very strong and you're starting to notice that it's just happening on its own throughout the day, and it seems like life is unfolding in such a way that it's giving you a lot of opportunities for stillness and silence. Your family might just go out of the house for a whole day, or you might watch these videos now more often, or whatever it is. It just seems like there's now, like there wasn't a lot of stillness and silence in life, and now there's just this big opening of the stillness and silence, and you feel so pulled to it. And then you start noticing that stillness and silence is actually always present. You realize that actually that stillness and silence is what the sounds and the activities are arising out of. That it's always present, and that you're able to connect with it in the absence of sound and in the absence of activity. It's like you've gotten so familiar with it that then it's like you are now noticing it, that it's actually here all the time. It's here in the midst of sound and activity. And you start noticing that there's this inner silence, this inner stillness at all times. You're not losing it. And it doesn't need certain conditions to have the house completely dead silent in order for you to experience it. There gets to be a point where the silence is the loudest thing you've ever experienced. Completely paradoxical. That even in the midst of being in a crowd, at a train station, at an airport, at the park, it's as if the silence is overpowering all those sounds. The silence moves from the background, which you weren't even aware of, to now the foreground. It starts permeating the experience. So that peace that you were only able to experience in the silence and stillness, when there was the absence of activity and the absence of sound, is actually right here in the midst of what you call your daily life. That you're experiencing this peace permeate in every activity. Hopefully this helps. I'll see you.